Welcome back to the Making the Madness YouTube channel. Sean back again for another video. This one is on Armando Bacot deciding to return to North Carolina for his junior season. The former McDonald's All-American and top 15 recruit in the class of 2019 is back once again after a 12-point per game, 8 rebound per game season in 2020-2021, averaged 22 minutes per game. But this season could look a lot different for Bacot and North Carolina as a whole because Hubert Davis is now the head coach rather than Roy Williams. And I think Davis is ready to modernize the way North Carolina plays basketball, less of having multiple big men that play in the post. Last year you had 4 guys like that. You had Day'Ron Sharpe, you had Garrison Brooks, you had Walker Kessler, and you had Armando Bacot, and Bacot's the only one there this year. The other 3 decided to move on. Sharpe is going to the NBA draft, while Brooks transferred to Mississippi State, and Kessler transferred to Auburn. I think we're going to see a lot more floor stretching ability out of North Carolina teams with Brady Manek coming in to play the 4. That's a stretch 4 that you're going to see play a huge role, and we're going to see a lot more guys like that in the future at North Carolina rather than lineups with like Garrison Brooks and Armando Bacot together, because then you're limiting how much shooting and floor spacing you can have, which is pretty much all of what basketball is about these days. You watch an NBA game and you see a screen being set from like way past the 3-point line, like 35 feet out. For Steph Curry, you have Kevon Looney or another Warriors center setting a screen from way outside, and that allows a lot more spacing on the floor. There's pretty much most offenses in the NBA run 5-out schemes, and Steph Curry's pulling up from 35 and hitting it a lot of times. That's just kind of the way the NBA is, and we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in college basketball like that in certain aspects. It's not completely the same, but I think just modernizing your offense up a little bit to be able to shoot the ball a little more, have a little more floor spacing, open up the floor is going to benefit North Carolina greatly, because Garrison Brooks wasn't very good last year. The only reason he played as much as he did was probably because he was a senior, because Day'Ron Sharpe and Walker Kessler were both better options at most points last season, and Bacot, of course, was too. Brooks was the worst big man on the floor out of the 4 oftentimes, and Kessler was really the odd man out, even though he was really good every time he stepped on the floor. It was Brooks' seniority that really kept him on the floor last year. But now when you look at this North Carolina squad from last year, they got blown out in the first round of the NCAA tournament by Wisconsin last year. 2 years ago, they wouldn't have made the NCAA tournament. Now we look at this team. Can this team be the team that gets North Carolina basketball back on the map? I'm willing to say they are. You get Bacot back. He's going to start at the 5. You can slot Brady Manek in at the 4, a career almost 40% shooter from outside, averaged double figures in all 4 of his seasons in Norman for the Sooners. You also had Justin McCoy from Virginia, a really good defensive big man that'll come off the bench. At the 3, you can go a few different directions here, probably. I'm going to say they probably go with Kerwin Walton there, who was their best shooter on the roster last year. A team that really struggled shooting the ball. Kerwin Walton was one of the few bright spots on the roster from that area. The Minnesota native shot 40% just about from outside, 42% actually from outside, 8 points per game last year. He's going to be a really solid piece for his North Carolina team. He has size and can shoot the ball at a high clip from deep. That's all you need out of him. At the 2, here's where you have a lot of different directions you can go. You can go with RJ Davis. You can go with Anthony Harris, a guy I still like a lot. I think there's a lot of potential there. He's just dealt with a lot of injuries. Can he finally be healthy? If that's the case, he's going to be a really good piece. You have DeMarco Dunn coming in, a 4-star freshman. And, out of those guys, and Leaky Black, of course, who's been there forever at this point, it seems like. He could even play the 3, and you can switch Walton to the 2 in that scenario. So I would assume Leaky Black ends up starting because he's a really good defender, great athlete. His scoring just leaves a lot to be desired. He's never really became the guy that a lot of people envisioned he would, but his defense is a real difference maker. He has size, he's a good athlete and can defend. 5 points a game, 4 rebounds per game, and 2 assists per game last year. And the reason I think he ends up starting is because he started pretty much every game the last 2 seasons, given those weren't the best North Carolina teams, but Leaky Black's defense will probably get him a ton of minutes next year. So you could say he ends up starting at the 2 probably, and you can put Kerwin Walton at the 3, and then at the 1, of course, you have Caleb Love returning for another year. He had a really disappointing freshman season, but he had a huge game against Duke. He had 10 points per game, 2 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game, shot only 31% from the field and 26% from deep, and one of his biggest issues was turnovers. 3.1 turnovers per game. That's just way too many. That really plagued him last year, and just the inconsistency shooting overall. But he had a few games where you're like, okay, this is the guy that was a 5-star recruit. This is the guy that was a first-round pick in the preseason, when he had 25.7 assists against Duke, hit 4 of 5 threes in a 91-87 win in Durham. That's the kind of guy they expected they were getting, and there's probably a few different reasons why he just didn't pan out last season. One of them likely being because there just wasn't really an offseason. I mean, at this point, you already have players coming back to campus pretty much everywhere. I believe almost every single school has their players back, and if not, they're getting them by the end of June. Last year, you weren't able to do team workouts until like October, I think, maybe even, that's a month before the season started, and we still weren't even sure if the season was going to start November 25th or whatever. I think it was November 25th, right? November 25th. We weren't even sure if it was going to start then. So there's just too much uncertainty last year. They weren't able to do team workouts. Players weren't on campus till later. There's just so much that we weren't sure about at this point last year. And now it's a normal offseason for the most part. Players are back on campus. They're going to have a full offseason to be able to practice with their team, get to know each other, get that continuity going, get the team building exercises rolling. And the switch from high school to college is a big difference because you're changing your lifestyle. You're not living at home anymore. You're living on campus, whether it's at an apartment close to campus or in a dorm or whatever. You're living close to campus. You're not living at home. And for a guy like Caleb Love, he's from Missouri, so he's not even near family, especially in a pandemic last year. That probably took a toll on some guys. Like we saw, a lot of guys ended up opting out because of, mental health issues and other stuff relating to the pandemic, which I certainly don't fault them for. I respect that 100%. But last year's just a weird year, so I just believe that the talent of Caleb Love is going to be able to win out this year. He's going to be a really good player, a first-team All-ACC guy in my eyes. I don't put a ton of stock into what happened last year. I think he's ready to have a big year, and a guy that I kind of compare him to in a lot of ways, not necessarily play style wise, but I could see it a little bit, is Trey Mann from Florida. He was pretty brutal his freshman season, had 5 points per game, was benched by the end of the season. Last year at 16 a game, 5 rebounds and 3 assists, and now he's a consensus first round pick. That's the kind of season I see Caleb Love having. He's going to be one of the best guards in the ACC, and a big reason why North Carolina could make some noise in the NCAA tournament next season. I have them as a borderline top 25 team right now. I have them 24th, I believe. That is subject to change, but I'd imagine they're not going to fall out of my rankings completely. I could totally see myself being wrong and them being a top 15 team by the end of the season, but in the ACC, there's a lot of interesting teams there. You have Duke, who I believe I have the number 1 team in the conference right now, but then you have a few other interesting teams. You have Florida State in the mix. You have Virginia, who a lot of people seem to like. I don't particularly love them. If Tony Bennett's not their coach, they're probably not a top 50 team. That's just not a great roster. They lack a lot of shooting. But I feel like the top 3, pretty consensus, is probably going to end up being the 3 I just mentioned, Florida State, Duke, and North Carolina. And then you can kind of piece the rest of the conference together. But overall, those are the 3 best teams in the conference. North Carolina should be back on the map. I think Hubert Davis is going to do a fantastic job and have them back in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament in no time. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. A lot of good content coming from Jonathan and myself. I just bought a webcam recently. I have to buy like an adapter cable to get it going to my MacBook because I didn't realize that it wouldn't fit it into the MacBook USB thing. I didn't realize that it wasn't going to fit, so I have to buy an adapter cable. So it might be a little bit of a delay before you get video content from me, but hopefully in the near future, both of us are in video content. We're going to have video podcasts in addition to being on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you're interested in podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the Making the Madness podcast on Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star review. If you leave a question, we'll answer it on the podcast. So definitely do all that. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, have a good one.